Hi everyone, this is Anna. I'm so happy that you're here. In this video, I will be showing you an easy technique using different water-based mediums to create beautiful, loose watercolor flowers using your stamps. This is so fun and easy, and it will look like you watercolored each card by hand. If you have floral layering stamps in your stash, chances are you may have the right ones for this technique. But I will show you another option in case you do not have layering stamps. First, we must choose the right kind of stamps. In this stamp set, the second layer here has just the right amount of open space, and the leaves have the same definitions as well. These ones would not work because it has no clear definition. Alternatively, this one would also not work for this technique because it's an outline image. In this stamp set, I chose these layers as the petals of the tulips are clearly defined. There is enough open space to give it a hand-painted look. If you do not have layering stamps, you can use these types of floral stamps. Here, the flowers are clearly defined, and these leaves are just perfect for this technique. I will be creating 3 cards. For my first card, I will be using my Gansai Tambi watercolors. I've had this in my stash for many years and have just recently rediscovered it. This watercolor has a consistency that is perfect for this technique. But of course, you can try to experiment with whatever watercolors you have. For this card, I will be using yellows and oranges for the flowers and 2 types of greens for the leaves. Here I have my watercolor paper, my stamps mounted on acrylic blocks, a paintbrush, and a glass of clean water, paints, and a fine mist spray bottle filled with water. I took a wet paintbrush and brought it to the paint to activate the pigment. I used the darkest color, a sort of red-orange, and painted it onto the middle of the flower. Then I took the medium color, a bright orange, and painted it next to the dark orange. For the outer petals, I used bright yellow. I made sure to mix it a little to soften the transition between the colors. Then I took the spray bottle and sprayed it once. The fine mist activated the pigment and helped blend in the colors. I stamped it down and let it sit there for a couple of seconds before lifting it up. This allowed the paper to absorb the paint. Then I repeated the same process for the second flower. Here you can see there's a lot of pigment left over for a second card. For the leaves, I used the lighter green and painted it on the upper part of the leaf cluster. The reason I didn't paint on all the leaves is that I didn't want it to bleed onto the flowers. I added darker green here and there for some color variation. The area between the 2 flowers is where I stamped the leaves. Then I did the same for the other side. Since there was a lot of pigment left, I took my sprayer to activate the paint. I cleaned off the stamp a little and proceeded to stamp it in areas where I felt needed more foliage. To give this a more hand-painted look and feel, I diluted some of the pigment and splattered it all over the card. To finish my card, I stamped a little happy birthday sentiment on the bottom right. For card number 2, I will be using gelatos. I actually bought this several years ago and still haven't gotten around to using them on a card. They have basically been sitting in my stash largely ignored. This is the perfect technique to bust them out. I took the biggest of the 2 flower stamps and scribbled on the gelatos, starting with the darkest color in the middle, then moving on to the lighter colors. Gelatos are basically watercolor chalks. They are water soluble and come in a variety of colors. These are usually used in mixed media applications. The pigment is very dry on the stamp, so I sprayed it a couple of times to activate the color. I stamped it down, then left it for a few seconds to let it absorb into the paper. And because I didn't apply too much water, the image transferred perfectly. Then I repeated the process and stamped the flowers in a random pattern, switching to the smaller flower until I was happy with the cluster I created. Then I did the same for the leaves. I took the lighter color of green and scribbled it all over the leaf cluster, then took the darker color and dabbed it here and there to add some color variation, gave it a spray, and then stamped it onto the card panel. I continued to do this until I got a sufficient amount of foliage around the flowers. I wasn't too concerned if the colors blended into each other because it just gave it a more hand-painted feel. There was a lot of leftover pigment on the stamp, so I diluted it with water and used it to splatter onto the card panel. This gave it a beautiful painterly effect. Then I stamped a simple thank you sentiment to finish the card. For the third and final card, I brought out my metallic watercolor set. I will be using the sterling silver from the set to create a monochromatic design. I took my wet brush and applied the silver paint onto one of the tulip stamps. I then stamped it on the card panel, but this time I did not leave the stamp on the paper. Since I'm not using watercolor paper, I did not want it to warp. And also, because it's not watercolor paper, the impression was not so distinct, but that was easily fixed. I used that impression to paint in the details. I took the other tulip stamp and repeated the process. This time I stamped it right below the other tulip. But here you can see that it looks like a big mess. That was again easily fixed. I just filled in all the little details following the impression that was on the stamp. Then I took the stem and applied paint and stamped it onto the flowers. I wanted the tulip bud to be behind the two flowers, so I applied paint only to the top half of the stamp. Then I stamped it above the flower. I painted the bottom part of the stem and stamped it. The impression was not perfect, so I fixed it by applying more paint. I did the same process for the leaves. To give it a more hand-painted feel, I splattered some paint onto the card panel. I really love how this turned out. To finish off the card, I added a die-cut sentiment from silver mirror cardstock for a more elegant look. Here's another look at the other cards. Which one was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching till the end, and I hope you were inspired. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed my video and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Till next time, bye!